I can't do this.
You can do this.
Yeah, but I don't want to do this.
But you have to do this.
I could skip a day.
You can't skip a day.
No one would know.
They pay attention, they'll know.
They'd know.
You can do this.
I can do this.
It'll be fine.
It'll be fine.
Do you need a hug?
I need a hug. Hi, I'm Mrs. Soap and Clay. We're talking about palm oil today. Let's make stuff. How's it going, Sudsers? Welcome back to the channel. You are at Soap and Clay, where we make all the soapy things, and you are here for day 141 of 365 days of soap. And today we are doing a deep dive on palm oil. The things I get myself into. First up, I did a count on this, and I have 74 tabs open that are all part of my research for this video. And that's a lot, like a lot. And it might be a very long one, and it might take me literally all day to do, because I might very well need some breaks. And the reason that I might very well need some breaks and to back away from all of this is because this particular subject is controversial as shit. And not just within the soap making world, in the world, because it's palm oil. And so, because it's probably going to be very long, we are not going to spend a ton of time talking about the origin of palm and how old it is and all of that jazz. We're more likely going to focus on, of course, how it's used in soap making, the fatty acid profiles that palm oil is comprised of, but also the controversy. And I am going to stay, for the most part throughout this video, as unbiased as possible. Because I don't really have a bias here. I'm just delivering the information. But of course, at the end of all of this, I am going to give, I don't know, some opinions in the way that I sort of look at the world and palm and things in general, because that's part of the whole thing too. So let's get to it. Let's see how crazy it all gets. I think we should probably start easy with where palm comes from and how much is produced. Okay, so the palm oil tree is actually in the same family as the coconut tree, and same family, wildly different, well, controversies and issues and yield and all the things. It's like a cousin. I have lots of cousins. We share bloodlines, but we are not alike. Palm trees, the ones that, produce palm oil, were originally native to West Africa, and they were brought to Southeast Asia in the 19th century. Palm trees themselves flourish in really hot tropical environments and really have their best yield when they are being grown 10 degrees north or south of the equator. Now, today, the two biggest exporters of palm, which actually makes up for 85% of the total global yield, comes from Malaysia and Indonesia. And again, as I said, they comprise 85% of the world's total yield for palm oil. So the bulk of it is no longer coming from West Africa. Palm oil is found in everything, in the everything that we consume, in toothpaste, in soap, in most foods at the grocery store. It is pervasive. It is everywhere. Interestingly, as I was researching this, I learned something that I was not actually aware of, And that's weird because I thought I knew everything there was to know about palm oil because I like research. I learned that out of the total global consumption of palm, only 14% of that actually is in the United States and Europe. So there's huge demand for palm, right? And me, you living in the United States, and a lot of you living in Europe and the United States, we only account for 14% of the total usage rate of palm oil. Over half of the usage rate comes from Asia. And there are a number of reasons for that, which I also found very, very fascinating. But before we get into that, let's talk about why palm oil hit such a spike in recent years. And it super has. Now, according to an article that I got from The Guardian, which I will actually link below, I might put all 74 of these currently open tabs below in the description box, so you can go read some very interesting things too. But according to this Guardian article, between 1995 and 2015, so in a 20-year span, the production of palm oil, because of the demand, quadrupled, going from 15 million metric tons to like 65 or 62 million metric tons annually, which is a lot. Now, you remember when we were talking about coconut oil last week, and I put up some figures and some stats about how like coconut oil has been known forever to be like this cure-all for everything, right? But we don't use nearly as much coconut oil in our day-to-day lives and all the things as we do palm. And I'm going to go ahead and put this infograph up again just to show you the wild difference between how much palm oil is manufactured and consumed every year versus all of the other oils. And you see coconut oil way, way, way down the list. And there's no real way to know exactly for sure with all of these things, but as I talked about in the coconut oil video last week, the number of acres that exist in the globe, and all of the jazz. Palm oil production is estimated to make up 10% of all permanent crops in the world. 10% of the land mass dedicated to agriculture, to farming, to growing things. Palm. We consume as world citizens a veritable shit ton of palm oil each and every year. Now the question is why? Well, one of the biggest reasons why palm oil got so popular and we just started adopting it the world over was because we started creating processed foods. And you remember this actually happened before most of us were born. This is not an ageism comment. Back in like the 60s or something, butter became like public enemy number one, right? Way too many saturated fats. Saturated fats are no bueno, very, very bad for you. And so they started developing these cool new substitutes for butter. And one of those substitutes for butter was margarine. Do you guys remember margarine? I have recipes from my grandma that has in there margarine as like for brownies and stuff. It's wild. It's wild. And, as an FYI, I haven't actually ever bought margarine ever in my adult life. I use butter and it tastes way better. Way better. Now, one of the unforeseen consequences of trying to remove butter and saturated fats from our diet was the creation of something even more insidious to our overall health. We discovered a new kind of fat, trans fats. And now those are the new public enemy number one. And so we work to avoid them. Now, because of this, palm oil, because of its fatty acid profile and its structure, it actually did create a very cool segue from, oh yeah, okay, so saturated fats, let's pay attention to those. Trans fats, super bad. Okay, so what about palm? Is it as bad? Well, in this really cool research study that they did called like the Paddington Project, I'm still quoting this amazing article from The Guardian, by the way. They tested like 600 different fatty acids, they tested like 600 different oils and fat blends and different combinations of fatty acids and whatever, and determined that palm oil was going to be the best solution to eliminating trans fats from things like margarines and things that needed a shelf-stable life on, the shelves of a grocery store than anything else that they had looked at, and also found that it has less saturated fat than butter, so winning all around. So palm oil began to make its way into our processed foods, and in turn we found a lot of cool things about palm oil and palm kernel oil in the process. It makes your french fries taste better. It again extends shelf life of all manner of things. It is a great emulsifier for all manner of skincare products, of shampoos, of conditioners, of toothpastes. Palm oil is a very, very versatile oil that can be used in a variety of situations. And so use it, we did. So that was really when we started adopting palm oil into our environment. And just think about all the things that we now consume, especially in the United States when it comes to processed foods. So I do find it very interesting that between us and Europe, we're only 14% of the consumption annually. And so that's interesting. But another reason why palm oil continued to grow and boom actually did have a lot to do with the economy, because the palm tree has such a high yield. It is such a high yield crop, and you don't need a lot of room, a lot of actual acreage to grow it. This became a bit of an economic boom for a lot of impoverished countries and villages and areas within these countries, literally dragging people and entire groups of just people out of poverty. They now had something to do, they had something to sell, and it was an item that the entire world wanted and needed. So they grew more of it. And a lot of times, countries specifically looked to exploit that. Because when there's a high demand for anything, somebody's going to try to exploit it. Palm oil was no exception to this at all. Now, going back to palm oil literally lifting, places out of poverty and expanding their economy, this was another interesting thing that I came across in my research that I had never actually correlated. But there are some very interesting studies, which I'll put below as well, about the consumption of fat and its relation to an accelerating economy. And so, as I said earlier, like half of the total world's consumption of palm oil comes from Asia, specifically India, China, and Indonesia. And they did studies on all of this and saw, and especially with India, this was a really interesting study and cool example. They had this economic boom between like 1993 and 2013 where their economy accelerated so much. We're like over quadrupled the per capita GDP from like $300 to like $1,400 like annually. Wild. And as a result, they have found in these studies, using a lot of areas that were kind of pulled out of poverty along the way, that when you have more money, when an individual has more money, they consume more fat. I didn't know that. Did you know that? Wild. And I know I'm talking about palm oil like consuming as in eating, and so it's a bit of an aside, but I did find that fascinating because the palm oil that goes into soap making, especially soap making at our level, when we are all small business soap makers, is like a fraction of a percent of the actual total use of palm oil, worldwide. I did want to talk about that as well because I did find that very interesting, and just a weird aside of how palm oil came into our food in the first place, and that's pretty cool, pretty fascinating. But let's get to what the palm seed thing is and how it's all produced. And then we can stop doing softball conversations and talk about the controversy. And then, of course, we're going to get to the actual usage in soap, for sure. I promise. So last week when I was talking about coconut oil, I mentioned that like the tree itself, I think has a lifespan of like 60 to 80 years. Is that right? Palm trees that produce palm oil, they only have a lifespan of like 25 to 30 years. And so that's, crazy. But their yield is wildly higher than coconut oil. And we will talk about that soon. But let's talk about the parts of the palm that we use and how we get the oil in the first place, now. So palm oil itself comes from the fruit that comes from the palm. And once these like fruit bunches are taken off the tree, they're taken to a factory and then they are like steam sterilized with all of the things to, sterilize the things. And much like coconut oil, most of the parts of palm trees are also used for everything. So a lot of the waste from the palm tree itself, as well as the actual seeds after the pressing has been done, they're used to make like mattresses and car seats and like seats and upholstery and biofuel. It's a very interesting conversation in and of itself, and we do not have time for that today. But all of the waste is used, and then a lot of the waste is also put back into the ground for fertilization, and that's just like the stalks and the fibers and all of the jazz, right? Now, the seed itself, the fruit itself, it is cold pressed to get two different types of oil, essentially. The fruit itself becomes the crude oil that becomes palm oil. Then you have the stone inside of the fruit. Now, that is what is pressed to get palm kernel oil. Makes sense. The name palm kernel, right? Well, where does that come from? It's from the stone. It's from the kernel inside the fruit. Yeah. And those two oils actually do have wildly different fatty acid profiles, which we will talk about when we are diving into that and what we use, palm oil for in soap making. But it is all cold pressed with palm oil. And then the waste from the pressing of both the fruit on the outside as well as the kernel inside are then used for biofuel to really fuel the plants themselves, the factories, as well as all manner of other things that this biofuel is used for. Wild conversation, we don't have time. Okay, and you remember last week when we were talking about coconut oil and how much yield I needed to actually, how many acres of land I need to actually just get what I need for my personal needs for coconut oil every year. Palm oil, just like with coconut oil, you can grow, about 70 trees on an acre, right? Here's the thing, and this was actually harder to pinpoint on the interwebs than coconut oil was. And I think one of the reasons for that is there are a lot of pro palm oil sites out there, organizations out there, and there are a lot of anti palm oil organizations out there. And I think that's the reason for the huge spread in numbers. So they did kind of jump all over the place. But from what I could gather by taking like 20 of them, and then just sort of running it and then going with the mean, an acre of palm, because it's a very, very high yield crop, incredibly high yield, produces 1 to 2 tons per acre, right? Now take that back to the whole coconut oil thing that produces less than a ton of coconut oil per acre. Granted, again, coconut oil, also there's other stuff that comes from the coconuts, but there's also other stuff that comes from the palm. So between 1 and 2 tons of palm oil per acre per year. Well, I don't even need a full acre to take care of my needs for palm oil, if that's the case, because I use, about 2,500 pounds of palm oil every year. And so maybe 1 full acre on me. And going back to the infographic about land use for vegetable crops that I showed you in the coconut oil as sort of a teaser for this one, let's look at this, and let's look at this a little bit longer. Up there at the top, that's the palm oil, and you see the size of that little thing there, right? Then go all the way down to the bottom with the gray, like the dark gray one at the bottom. That's coconut oil. And the amount of land needed to produce the world's needs of coconut oil and the amount of land needed to produce the world's needs of palm oil, which is exponentially by a factor of a lot more every year, is about the same. Palm oil is a very, very high yield crop, and so it takes less land to actually grow and cultivate and farm and process palm oil than a lot of others, than all others, actually. And I found that to be really interesting. Also, back up, look at the soybean. That deep dive is going to be weird. So looking at the total consumption of palm oil worldwide every year, it's like 74 million metric tons, right? Versus coconut oil, which sits at about 3 to 4 million metric tons annually. Wow, I'm moving my hand a lot. It's very interesting that the amount of land that is needed to meet both of those demands, about the same. So what's the big deal? Palm oil has a very high yield, and you don't need a lot of land to grow it. You can meet the demands with about as much land as you would need to meet the demands of coconut oil, which is significantly less demand. So what's the big deal? Why the controversy? Why is this all a problem? Why are there talks about boycotting palm oil? Well, I guess we're getting into that now. So let's go do that. Okay, so for those of you who may want to just skip this entire thing, you don't want to learn about the controversy and whatever, cool, just stay with me for a couple minutes and then you can flip to the next, section. But so I'll give you Cliff's Notes right off the bat and then we'll dive a little bit deeper with the rest of them. Okay? Okay. The biggest reason why there's controversy is because of the deforestation that occurs when the oil palm is being grown and cultivated and harvested. Deforestation is obviously a terrible thing. We need trees, and we will talk more about why we need trees just in general, later, but we're just giving some high points right now. But one of the reasons deforestation is bad is because we all like to breathe. We like oxygen, and trees help us do that. 1. 2, the deforestation of many areas, and we will definitely talk deeper about the Amazon coming up, but many areas in general, all areas, whenever you're talking about the deforestation of any area, you are running the risk of killing out the bioculture that lives there. And so you are displacing animals. You are completely wiping out other native flora and fauna. It's just bad times had by all. Palm oil specifically has been linked to orangutans, pygmy elephants, the Sumatran rhino, I think, among others, for sure, and a lot of actual, unique plant species. And that's freaking terrible. So deforestation is bad, for sure. Another issue that we have with palm oil that's a pretty big controversy, and rightly so, is the slave labor and it's still slave labor. Well, the exploitation of child labor. And that's gross. And across the world, that has occurred in different areas from different people. Sometimes it's not even the farmers themselves, it's the governments doing it. It's freaking gross. For sure. A well-deserved controversy. So these are obviously things that we want to avoid. We do not want deforestation. We do not want forest degradation as a result of deforestation. And I think I want to say it was in the 70s. I wasn't alive for it, but I remember watching this really cool documentary on it on the Amazon. I think it was the 70s that they rang the alarm. We had lost a certain percentage of the Amazon. And, we're talking about the real Amazon here. Not. As an aside, it was disgusting that, just doing a Google search, how much of the Amazon has been destroyed. The first 5 hits were involving Amazon. Can you get off my shit, Bezos? Just kidding. Just kidding. Amazon's cool. It's a love-hate relationship, really. But yeah, deforestation and of the Amazon, I think that started in the 70s, and we had lost a percentage of the Amazon to illegal cutting and burning. Now, why does the deforestation of the Amazon really matter? Well, as I said before, we need trees. Trees are very, very important. And these particular trees were actually, the Amazon is this really cool thing in that it creates its own ecosystem, right? And so it's pulling the CO2 out of the air just because that's what plants do. Plants are going to plant and, photosynthesis and oxygen. And that's amazing. But then also the aside to that, consequence of that is because it's so hot and so lush at the ground surface of all of that, methane gases are actually being created, and they're being, thrown out into the world and the environment and the atmosphere too. But because of the self-sustainability of the Amazon essentially creates more good than harm, even though we also have methane gases that are coming up from the trees or from the Amazon bed. Anyway, not the point. The Amazon is very important for the entire ecosystem, arguably. I mean, it has this giant river that runs through the entire thing, right? That actually feeds into the ocean. And the rainfall that exists within the Amazon has been found in recent years to also impact other areas in the Americas, right? So it's not just Brazil that we're looking at. It's also, Mexico, it's North America, it's further south. It's all of the things. And when droughts come in the Amazon, well, the trees start dying, they start losing leaves. You lose some leaves, well, there's less photosynthesis going on, and then there's less oxygen. And that also means that there's more carbon in the air, and we have a big problem. I'm not going to get political about this, and I'm not, I read a very interesting article from worldwildlife.org, actually a number of them, and I will put that below. You can go read it and get more information on the Amazon and why it's a problem that we are continuing to lose it, and why it's estimated that by like 2056 we're screwed, and that, you know, and why that if Brazil continues on with its current cutting of the Amazon, we're in for a lot of problems. You can read all that on your own. I'll link the articles below, and maybe you can adopt an orangutan while you're there. Seriously, they're adorable. Adopt one. But yeah, so deforestation of all areas, because again, we were just talking about where palm comes from, right? And the bulk of it does not come from Brazil, but this is occurring everywhere. And there are natural habitats that are completely being decimated in all areas of the world to just increase the production of palm. It is not just to increase the production of palm. We will talk about that in my wrap up. But this is occurring everywhere. The Amazon happens to be our biggest and most insane example of like the coolest little... The Amazon's cool, guys. Let's not kill it. Okay? But every area that's being cleared, and also one of the ways that you clear areas is fire, and if you clear too much, it actually leads to more natural fires. It's all a thing. It's all a big problematic thing. I'm not getting political today. It all ultimately comes back to what I've said in multiple videos, and what I've said at least once in this video. When something can be exploited, someone is going to exploit it. And that is currently what is happening with palm oil. Now, in recent years, in the last 20 years or so, the RSPO has been working toward more sustainable palm oil. Because here's the thing, palm oil is freaking sustainable. It is very, very easy to grow responsibly palm oil without doing damage to the environment. You can do. In fact, the majority, if you go check your sources for soap making materials, wherever you buy your soap supplies, and you find one that is not carrying responsibly sourced palm oil at this point, please let me know. Please put them in the comments, because I want to call them out. There is no reason to not be using responsibly sourced palm, especially in our needs, because again, we make up little teeny tiny baby nothing percentage of the palm oil consumption the world over as us as soap makers. So there's no reason for us to not use responsibly sourced palm. Now, the RSPO just recently in the last few years, because they're not without their faults as well, and just within the last few years, they've actually really started tamping down on their requirements for responsibly sourced palm and to be counted among them, and are actually enforcing them. So that just started happening in like 2018 or something. So time will tell whether or not that's really super effective. But for our needs, what we do as soap makers, we know that it's easy to get responsibly sourced palm because it's in all the shops. It's easy to get. So do that if you're going to be using palm, and, you know, don't contribute to continued exploitation of, well, children and horrible working conditions, and, you know, killing off the orangutans and the elephants. Okay, so the controversy is palm oil bad because deforestation and exploitation of humans. And okay, cool. So what can be done? Boycott. No. 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 Boycotts are actually a pretty bad idea for a number of reasons, and I'm going to link the article that I got from the UK WWF. But in general, across the board, like sort of as an aside, just an overarching whatever, boycotts are ineffective. They don't really work. But even if you didn't have that sort of pessimistic attitude that I do, and you have not yet become cynical in life, a boycott of palm oil would actually be a pretty bad idea because of the amount of palm oil that we need, that we are using, that we are consuming worldwide. And so boycotting it, it's going to put a big strain on other vegetable oil crops. And by big, I mean monumental. And going back to the land use and the yield of a lot of other very popular vegetable oil crops out there, can you think of another oil that has such a high yield? Can you think of another crop that has the yield of palm in the smaller footprint that palm does? It's not a good idea because you're going to create problems elsewhere. It's like I was talking about with the coconut oil thing. And like I've said multiple times in this video, exploitation, when things can be exploited, people will exploit them. And if we boycott and ban palm oil just across the board, well, then some other vegetable oil is going to have to take the place of palm in all of our products, not just the products we make as soap makers, because we can make those decisions on our own and not have palm in our recipes at all. It doesn't actually impact our soap. There are lots of suitable soap recipes that don't include palm. But just in our everyday usage and the things that we consume as consumers, another vegetable oil is going to have to take its place, which means it's going to create a huge demand and a huge strain on those production cycles. And we're going to be dealing with the same problem with another oil or multiple other oils. Because again, you're going to need a whole lot more acreage to grow any of these other crops than you do for palm. So that's problem number one. Problem number two is, as I said earlier, a lot of countries, of areas, of communities have pulled themselves out of poverty because of palm oil. And that's a good thing for humans. And so as long as they're not exploiting humans in the process, we don't want to just take that away from them out of the blue and therefore eliminate their means of survival. That's not a good idea. Palm oil is 40% of the world's total vegetable demand. One oil, 40% of the world's total vegetable oil demand. Done on 10% of the world's land, agricultural land. And so you take that away, you are taking away incomes and survivability for a not insignificant number of people. And so boycotting it is a bad idea for that reason too. So what can we do? Well, as individuals, on an individual level, we can choose to only support companies and patronize companies that use responsibly sourced palm, which is all verified and tracked. From a bigger picture, as individuals, but also the trickle-up effect, you vote, you do things, you get the right people in office to whatever, countries can create policies, very strict policies, regarding the importation of any item for any reason. I mean, within the last decade, the UK itself, like the UK, the whole thing, decided that they don't want palm oil in any of their products that come into their country unless it's been responsibly sourced and it hasn't harmed humans or animals or the environment. And today they're like at 70% of that goal. So like 70% of the products that come in are responsibly sourced palm. And that's just been within a decade's time. They're getting to that 70%. So good on them. There are lots of things that we can do to ensure that we are not contributing to the deforestation and the exploitation of the planet and everything that that means. Boycotting is not necessarily the way to go because we don't want to harm the environment or the peoples or anything else more than what palm is currently doing. However, that is not to say that the current harming should not stop, and it should. We need to be vigilant. We need to pay attention where we can. We need to source our palm responsibly, and we need to, again, just pay attention. And speaking of pay attention, and another just aside for all of this too, now soap makers, I know a lot of soap makers that actively choose to no longer use palm oil, and that's fine. That's great. Okay. There are lots of great recipes out there. I have a lot of great recipes that do not include palm. I personally do include palm in, about half my recipes because I like palm. I like what it does to soap. And again, I responsibly source my palm. And the biggest thing that I'm always asked for a palm oil substitution is, well, if I don't want to use palm oil, what can I substitute it for? I mean, babasu is the easiest vegetable, but it's not a direct dupe. Coconut oil, it's not a direct dupe at all as far as the fatty acid profiles go. And we're going to talk more about all of those, in the next section, I promise. But a very common thing that occurs within soap makers is they refuse to use palm oil and instead they use animal fats. I don't want to talk about this. So if we're talking about deforestation, and you don't want to deforest the world, substituting an animal fat using an animal fat instead of palm? Deforestation occurs because of cattle ranching more than palm production. And honestly, if you logic that out, like, it makes sense as to why you need to clear areas so cows can be housed and graze and all of the things. That makes sense. I get it. I grew up on a cattle ranch. I understand how that shit works. With that, you're not replacing the trees, right? So you logic this out. And yes, things are being destroyed and therefore some ecosystems are being destroyed. And the animals that live in these areas are being pushed out, being killed, driven to the brink of extinction. Like, those are horrible things. Those things happen with cattle ranching and with palm. But at the end of palm, they grow new trees. And so the environment and the atmosphere and all of the things, it's benefiting from the tree, right? Ish. We have fertilizer problems that we're not even touching on right now. And I'm also not touching methane gases in relation to cows and agriculture and livestock agriculture. Not in this video. That will be in animal fat videos. We don't have time. And I don't want to. If your solution to the palm oil problem is to just avoid palm completely and, use animal fats for your soaps or continue to eat hamburgers, I don't know that you're really helping anything. So, just keep that in mind for some food for thought. I think we've talked about this controversy enough. Can I stop? Can I stop? I want to be done. I want to go to why is palm in soap. So we're going to go do that. And we're going to be done with this because I don't want to anymore. Okay, so back to it. If you hear something weird going on in the background of the audio that I'm not going to be able to get out in post, I'm not sure if I will. I've been in here for a while. It is very, very cold. I had to kick on the heater. You don't care. I care, and I'm letting you know. Anyway, back to it. We are talking about palm oil, its uses in soap, and what it's comprised of. Okay, so first up, when you go to buy palm oil, you're going to have basically three options in front of you. You're going to have red palm oil. You're going to have palm oil, usually an RBD, and then you're going to have palm kernel oil. And depending on where you're going for your oils, there will be other options too. There's like palm oil shortening, for example, that is a new thing. It's like a no stir variety. That's awesome. And there's just different ways of actually talking about and categorizing the different palms. And just like with the coconut oil, it all has to do with the amount of processing that has been done. So for the red palm oil, that is considered to be the palm oil that's been least touched, least bleached, least cleaned, essentially. And then you have your regular palm oil or your RBD palm oil. Again, that's kind of both, one and the same. And then you have palm kernel oil. Now, chemically, red palm oil and RBD palm oil and even the palm oil shortening, I did double check and look that up just to make sure. The fatty acid composition is just basically the same. I mean, we're talking about fractions of percentage points across those two. Across all of the different types of palm that you could be getting, RBD, red palm, whatever. Then obviously the exception to that rule is palm kernel oil. Palm kernel oil is different the way fractionated coconut oil is different. Remember when we talked about fractionated coconut oil in the last one? So that one actually is different. So just keep that in mind. Now, palm oil in and of itself, whether used topically or ingested, has lots of medicinal benefits, skin benefits, all of the things, right? It's very high in vitamin E, lots of cool antioxidant properties going on. It's been known to help with brain function and heart disease and all manner of things if ingested. Just giving you that information so you know, but we're talking about soap. Now, palm oil itself, whether it's red palm or the palm oil RBD version or even the shortening, fatty acid composition is as follows. It's 44% palmitic acid, about 40% oleic, and then like around 4 to 5% of stearic, and then other trace amounts of a few other acids. So really what we are looking at is the palmitic, the oleic, and just for funsies, the stearic. Now, palm kernel oil is actually closer to coconut oil as far as like a substitution would go. And it is comprised of 48% lauric acid, 16% myristic acid, and 15% oleic. So quite a big difference between the two, right? Palm oil versus palm kernel. So keep that in mind. Comes from the same fruit, but different parts of the fruit, essentially the fruit and the nut, well, the kernel. Different fatty acid profiles. Therefore, those are not good direct subs. Okay, so for palmitic acid, what does that do in soap? Well, that contributes to bar hardness. It contributes to a big, beautiful, creamy lather, and also very stabilizing lather. So palm oil is an oil that I love to put in all manner of soaps because of the bar hardening properties, but also because of the lather stability. And if you're looking to make something like a shave soap, for example, palm oil is great. I mean, I think I've done a 2-ingredient recipe on the channel for... Yeah, I think I've done that with palm oil and coconut oil. Just equal parts, creates a really amazing shave bar. So play with that for sure. So that's what palmitic acid does in soap. Now for the oleic, which again makes up about 40% of the fatty acids in palm oil, well, we've talked about that. It's great for the moisturizing. Big, nice, creamy lather with that moisturizing properties. Olive oil is like our best known example of a very moisturizing oil because it's high in oleic acid. It sits about 55%. So keep that in mind, 40% oleic in palm oil. So really we have bar hardening, 44% palmitic, and moisturizing, 40% oleic, and then, you know, not big boost on the bubbles because there isn't really any lauric acid in it, but nice, creamy, stable, beautiful lather. Cool thing about palm oil too is it has that 5%-ish of stearic acid in it. And stearic acid, I love because it creates this really nice velvety lather. And it also contributes to bar hardening and helps create a more stable emulsion. So that's always fun too. But that's basically what palm oil is made of and why we would use it in soap and how we would use it in soap. Palm kernel oil, as I said, it's actually more similar to coconut oil. So that's going to be something that you would use as a substitute for coconut oil before you would use it as a sub for palm if what you're after are, you know, the nice bar hardening and the creaminess and the stability of the lather. Substitutions for palm. I mean, my substitution for palm oil is always babassu, and it's not because it has anything to do with fatty acid profiles. It's just the way that I use palm oil in soap, babassu achieves that same effect just because of the combinations of the lauric, the myristic, and the oleic. Yeah, but in all actuality, babassu looks more like coconut oil than, you know, palm oil does. So it's not a direct sub. Well, one really good substitution for palm oil would be cocoa butter. It's not a perfect sub, but it does have 25% palmitic acid in it, and so you're a step in the right direction. And also has 35% stearic acid, so you're still getting that bar hardness, but you're also getting that cool, really silky lather, which is awesome. Now, if you're going into the animal byproducts for your oils, lard is a pretty good substitution for palm oil. It's around 30% palmitic acid and pretty substantial amounts of stearic as well. So that's a pretty good sub too. Really though, if you're looking to substitute palm oil, what you're going to be doing is what I suggest in the coconut oil vid and what I will always suggest. Look to the fatty acid composition of the oil in question and see if it kind of matches up with the fatty acid profile of the oil that you're looking to substitute out. Make sense? Okay, so to wrap this up, what does it all mean? Well, palm oil is a really cool oil. It is a very versatile oil as evidenced by the fact that it's used in almost everything. It has a high yield, it's very inexpensive, and it has taken lots and lots of people out of poverty. Also, in doing so, it has hurt the environment, and it has hurt people, and that's a problem. And we don't like that. So we like to try to solve problems. Now, going back to the solving of problems things, I don't think boycotting is the right answer. I think that ultimately will do more damage to the environments and to the peoples that live in said environments than we really anticipate and really what we want. So again, my best recommendation is going to be what I said in the coconut oil video, because that has some controversy surrounding it too. Everything in moderation. Be responsible shoppers. Pay attention to where you're getting your palm. Make sure it's responsibly sourced. And that is true of everything. And also remember that when you start boycotting one thing, something else is going to suffer. And when we really, really want and demand this one thing, a lot of things are going to suffer. It's like, and this is an aside, that we will probably talk about more in depth when we do avocado oil, but like, the avocado production that's going on in Mexico right now, so avocados, avocado butter, avocado oil, all things from an avocado, they're like killing the monarch butterflies. Like, that's insane, and that's sad. And so, like, monarch butterfly population has just dwindled down to practically nothing in, like, the last 15, 20 years because we've been, like, super obsessed with avocados. And so everything has an impact. For every cause, there is an effect. For every action, reaction. You get it. And for avocado oil right now, we're losing the monarch butterflies. That's for another video. But just keep those things in mind. Make smart choices as consumers. Make smart choices as soap makers. Continue being awesome and making awesome products and doing your very best every day. And that's how we all get through this crazy, awesome, fun, confusing, complicated thing that we call life. So that does it for me today. I hope you guys had a good-ish time watching me squirm through a lot of controversy and shit that I don't really want to talk about. I mean, I do want to talk about it. Whenever there's controversy, it just becomes this big old thing. And I am not looking for fights in the comments. So if you guys want to have constructive conversations with me or with each other, that's great. But just understand that if it gets froggy with me or with anyone else down there, shit will be deleted. People will be blocked. We are not going to start fighting about palm oil is good or palm oil is bad in this comment section. This is a safe space for me. I try to make it a safe space for you, and we're not going to do that. So constructive criticism, constructive conversations, no fighting. I know this is a hot button issue. I know this one's controversial, but let's keep it nice. Okay? Awesome. We're all adults. We can do it. As I said, I'm out of here for today. I am really, really happy that you guys joined me for another deep dive, and this is going to be kind of a long one. So thanks for sticking with me. I will see you guys all again tomorrow. I think I'm starting a new project tomorrow. I'm so excited about it. Oh God. Okay. I think that's tomorrow. I don't know. I guess we'll find out. But I will see you then for another round of soapy fun. Bye.